Good afternoon and welcome to yet another Oxford Spark Science at Home live Q&A. If you're new here, please subscribe. We're doing this every Tuesday and Thursday where you'll get to hear from another researcher on a different topic. Plus we have podcasts and animations coming out all the time, so you'll be the first to know. This afternoon we have such a treat for you. We're not joined by just one, we're joined by three researchers who work on the ninjas of the sea. They're very cute as well. That's right, it's penguins. I have with me Dr. Tom Hart, Dr. Fiona Jones, and second year DPhil PhD student Nacho Juarez, who work on the Penguin Watch project. So, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, how's it going?
Very well.
Very good.
Yeah.
Good. So for all of those watching, don't forget that you can ask questions. We've got tons to get through from social media, but if you stick them in the chat box, we can put them to the researchers as we go. But just to get us started, Tom, do you want to give us an introduction to penguins and why research about them matters?
Right, so penguins are indicator species. They forage at sea and they breed on land. So they're one of the ways we can monitor the health of ocean ecosystems. And around the world, they're found in the southern hemisphere, other than a few up at the Galapagos. But around the world, seabirds and particularly penguins are declining. That's certainly not true for every species. So we think that they're good indicators of the health of the ecosystem. So what we do with Penguin Watch is very much try and monitor them in new and exciting ways to disentangle the threats to them, to work out, is it fishing or climate change or what in each location. Great.
And so what is it that you're doing? Tell us about how you do your research.
Well, we a lot of places in Antarctica are visited. So we hitchhike. I mean, we do set up our own field camps and expeditions on yachts, but we largely hitchhike on people that are going there anyway. And we've reverse engineered our science around what we can do in a 3-hour window. So what we do is we fly drones, and that counts each colony whenever we're there. We pick up a lot of poo and feathers because that's good for recording what they've been eating, what diseases they're exposed to. And but our big thing, our unique thing is that we put cameras in place. So we leave and service cameras that record a year in the life of every colony we monitor, despite the fact we might only go there for 3 hours each year.
Wow. And it's pretty awesome that you get to travel to these places. You say they're visited, they're obviously not visited very often, but obviously by putting up cameras, you've also given the public a really awesome opportunity to help you do research, right?
Very much. Well, we're continually engaging, but also this is for us a way to crowdsource and get through all of these data. So these time-lapse cameras record every hour usually. They take a photo of what's going on in the colony. We probably collect about 500,000 images per year, and that is too much for us to go through, even Nacho. So we crowdsource. So with the Zooniverse, we built Penguin Watch, which is a citizen science program. It's very successful, and we've also from the back of that, we've been able to, with collaborators, we've been able to automate a lot of this. So we use AI. So what you'll see in Penguin Watch at the moment is not only the ones that complement or validate the automation, but you'll increasingly see new species and new examples where we now use Penguin Watch to help other researchers around the world.
Great. And so what are people doing when they're taking part? Is it easy?
It's easy and it's mildly addictive, mildly meaning addictive. And people go there and they click on every penguin. So it's a very easy to get task. It's easy for the public to recognize the difference between an adult, a chick, and an egg, and all we're asking them to do is to click on each one. So for most penguins in Antarctica and the subantarctic, these are big colonies, so you're clicking on 30 or 40 adults per image. And in New Zealand, Australia, where these are single nesting penguins, you'll just be looking at what's going on one nest by nest.
Great. So obviously we've got quite a few questions to get through, and hopefully maybe that will bring up some about what you found in your research as well. But I thought I'd just start with this question, which I think was from a member of the public. So you mentioned that generally speaking, penguins are found in the southern hemisphere. So someone's asked, why are there no penguins in the northern hemisphere?
Well, so we know from fossil evidence that penguins originated in the southern hemisphere, and we know from today that penguins are very, very dependent on cold water and cold water currents. So even in the warmest places that penguin lives, like the Galapagos, where they live on almost on the equator, they live on very, very cold waters because the Galapagos are bathed by the Humboldt Current that comes straight from Antarctica through all of the west coast of South America and into the Galapagos. What we think is that they haven't managed to pass the more northern belt of warmer waters to go into the northern hemisphere. However, in the northern hemisphere, we have an ecological equivalent that are the auks. The auks, they are phylogenetically, so they're not distinct, so that they're not family of the penguins. They come from a different bird group, but they have adapted to the same environment. So probably if penguins had gotten to the northern hemisphere, they could have survived there with probably, and they would have evolved there differently.
Yeah. What is it about cold water in particular that penguins rely on?
So cold in general is more productive than warm water because so cold water is capable of storing more gas. So the warmer the water is, the less dissolved gas that the water can have. This is either oxygen to feed the algae and CO2 for the algae to give to the water to get rid of. So the colder the water, the easier it is for algae to reproduce and thrive. That was the word I was missing. So the more algae, the more animals, little microscopic animals, can feed on the algae, and then other animals can live on that, and that's where penguins come in.
Great. I think that's answered that question. So moving on to the next question, again from a member of the public. Obviously, we see penguins waddling around on the land, but they're very much birds of the water, really. But they do need to come on land. So how do penguins dry their feathers when they come out of the water?
I'll get this. Well, penguin feathers are amazing. They actually have a lot of different types of feathers. Some are kind of sensory, almost like some of our hairs that are used in sensing. A lot of them have a dual function of their streamlining, and so they're and they need to retain warmth, so they're insulating, and they need to be very waterproof. So on the head, on the flippers, those ones are really involved in, if you like, flight, so underwater. Those are the streamlined feathers, and those are very short and very hard. On the body, they're more about insulation. So penguin feathers have these double shanks, so they're a bit like tiles. If you think of roof tiles that are overlapped like that, the outside is very, very waterproof, and the inside they have a separate little shank that's like a very fluffy part of it. So it's a bit like wearing a down jacket, where the feathers actually contribute to the outer bit. So they preen a lot, They have an oily gland that they preen and maintain the water repellency. But even when they're diving quite deep, they're usually retaining that air bubble for insulation. So within their feathers, just below the outer surface that you see, they'll retain air throughout. They do still. So when they come ashore, you'll see them just shed water, and they're still very, very oily and water repellent. But yeah, they do dry out. They still need a tiny bit of drying out, and it really doesn't take long. They're obviously they're warm on the inside, so in the cool environment, it doesn't take long for them to dry out any feathers. But the incredible thing is that they're largely dry throughout.
Ah, interesting. I can see we've got a question on YouTube, but I'm just going to ask this other question first, and we'll get to the YouTube question. So thank you. Keep the questions coming on YouTube. So how loyal are penguins when they're in couples? Do they couple up? How long do they stay in couples?
Shall I jump in here? I feel I've been very quiet. A lot of people, when they hear I work on penguins, say, I love penguins. It's so cute how they mate for life. And then I look at them and I think, should I tell them that's not true? So yeah, I'm afraid it's a myth. They mate for life. They can be monogamous in a season. So that's the term we use to describe them, when they're loyal for that breeding season. But then they can get divorced, and we do sometimes refer to it as getting divorced, and then they'll have a new partner for the next season. So this isn't, a consistent thing between all species. Some are more loyal than others. In some species, they will maintain the same pair for 2 or 3 seasons. But, we have the emperor penguin as kind of that paragon of monogamy and loyalty, but unfortunately that's not true. And the closely related king penguin, I think it's just over 80% of pairings, they don't last to the next season. And about a third of Humboldts cheat on their partners during the season. So we like to think of them as these innocent creatures, but throughout the next 20 minutes or so, you'll probably hear that it's not all about cute waddling tuxedoed penguins. Actually, they're impressive creatures in a lot of respects, and not quite as cute, I think.
Where do you think that image of the loyal monogamous penguin comes from?
It's difficult, isn't it? I think, you see those pictures of them together. They've been anthropomorphized a lot through years of literature and films, and there is this image. I think Tom will not like me for saying this because it's something we're very against, but people think of them as small humans because they don't fly. They waddle along in this kind of what people think of as a clumsy way. And yeah, I mean, they bring stones to each other, and they do have their sort of nuptial rituals and things, which gives them this cute appearance. And I don't know for sure, but maybe the early explorers, penguins look the same to the untrained eye. Maybe they thought that the couples were monogamous. I don't know if anyone else can interject on why that might be.
I think some of the infidelity has come about through genetics. So that's one way we know.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're right in that people just really want it to be true. Whereas we can actually find examples of every different example of relationship you can find in a human, you can find.
Oh yeah, there was a famous Levick paper, which we probably shouldn't go into a lot, but brought to light a lot of interesting facts about penguins. I think though that the albatross, if you're looking for a species to look up to, or a group of species, they are pretty loyal. So there you go.
Look into that afterwards. Well, going to our YouTube questions then. Thanks for those that are coming in. So the first one is from CSK81191. Thank you. They've asked how many. So you mentioned obviously that there's AI at work at the images that you're getting back as part of your research, and they've asked how many manually annotated photos are needed as the training set to be available for the AI program to work well. Because
good question.
Yes,
definitely for Fiona, because you kept track of this, didn't you?
Oh gosh, well, so I should probably tell you a little bit about PengBot, which is what we've called the penguin counting algorithm. So this is a great computer vision algorithm that we can't take credit for personally. It's the work of the Visual Geometry Group in Oxford. And I believe it was trained initially on 70,000 images. And this is something that I talk about when people say how important is the citizen science, because they think maybe machine learning is just taking over. But not only is citizen science great as an engagement tool, and because humans can spot unusual behaviors and things that a computer can't, but also we need the citizen science classifications, as the person who asked the question pointed out, in order to train them. So 70,000, but it's actually being continually trained. So it's a constantly moving parameter. As we get more of those dot annotations on images, they can work to improve the algorithm. So at the moment, it's excellent at counting adults, and we're working on enabling it to count chicks as well. So that's something that we need all of those new data for. So a lot, basically, and it's something that's really valuable. And we've been really pleased to be able to bring to the computer vision community as well, to actually have a highly annotated data set like this, which is all organized in a logistically sensible way, is something that isn't apparently often come by, and so that's enabled them to develop these algorithms and take it to their computer vision conferences, and show that actually this sort of recognition is possible, and it's right with them.
Also, I feel we will still need citizen science to annotate this, even when we start using more extensively the algorithm, to check for discrepancies between what a human sees and what the machine can see. Do you remember, Tom, that time that we put, I don't remember which colony this was from, but it was, there were no penguins. It was all just covered in a bit of snow, but enough to look like it was full of penguins.
Yeah.
And the algorithm recognized like roundish rocks with white things on top as penguins. And actually, we need to zoom in a lot to distinguish if they were actually penguins or not.
They did genuinely look like penguins, and I think it got confused because there was no other.
There was not
penguins.
But
we've. It's also. I mean, the refinement of both has allowed us to get much better at what we do. So, we now put these cameras on a taller pole, looking down, and actually learning each other's language. So learning what we as biologists wanted to get from this, what the computer vision guys wanted, and how they were going to do it has been really useful. We very much we still need the citizen science, and also we're applying it to new examples, new species, new backgrounds. So we still very much need it. The human eye is still incredibly good at annotating novel problems.
That's very reassuring to know then that the people aren't redundant yet. So another question off YouTube. Thanks for them coming in. We're going to get through as many as we can, but I think if we don't manage to get through them all, don't worry. We'll do. In fact, the Penguin Watch team are taking part in a Twitter takeover over on Oxford Spark's Twitter tomorrow and Saturday, which I totally forgot to mention, is Penguin Awareness Day. How could I forget this? Get your penguin fill this weekend. So social media Sarah or Sarah is asking, which species have you been mostly studying?
Do you want me to?
Which species?
Like that? So sort of for the last few years, we've primarily been studying the Pygoscelis penguins, which is the fancy word for, it's the genus name for 3 species that we study. The common name is the brush-tailed penguins, because of the little brush tail that trails along the ice, but it's the gentoos, the chinstraps, and the adeles. I say the species that we've been studying for the past few years because now we're in a really fortunate position where we're able to bring in other species that other research groups have been looking at into Penguin Watch. And I think that might be something that Tom and Nacho, because they've been working on this for World Penguin Day, might talk about. But yeah, we've primarily been looking at the gentoos, chinstraps, and adeles, because they're 3 species that live on the Antarctic Peninsula and in the Scotia Arc region. So that's counting sub-Antarctic islands like South Georgia and the South Shetlands. And they're important to study because it looks like they're actually all responding differently to climate change. We often think with climate change, it might be damaging all the species in a region or something like that, but there's actually winners and losers. And it seems that the gentoos are doing quite well. They're what we call generalist species. They're able to do well in the warmer conditions, and they're moving southwards, whereas the more specialist adeles and chinstraps, which need more ice, they are very krill dependent, and there's all sorts of reasons why the climate and fisheries might be impacting krill populations. They're more dependent on those and not doing so well. So they've been a really interesting group of the species to study. But I will just hand over to Tom and Nacho to say a bit more about the new species that we're looking at.
Yeah, so we actually within the cameras, or within the network that we monitor, we also have one emperor colony. We have several king penguins colonies, many king penguins, and
many,
and several macaronis as well. And then through collaborators in Argentina, we're also gaining rockhoppers and Magellanics, and from Australia the little penguins, and from New Zealand the tawakis, which are one of the crested penguins. So these cool bright headdresses.
Awesome. So lots of penguins. I had a couple of questions about how you got into the field, how you became a penguinologist. So Kirsty and Mary June both asked, how did you get into this? So I don't know if maybe each of you can say just a little bit about how you got there, and maybe what your advice is for people who are keen on getting into marine biology or penguins specifically. Start with Tom.
I begged. I mean, it wasn't strictly penguins. It really wasn't. I very much was in love with what I thought was important about the Antarctic Treaty. So it was very much the ecosystem and the threats and the approach to that. But Antarctica is weird in that no one really knows what it's like until they go. So, it's a dream, and it is very different to the dream. I mean, I particularly fell in love with South Georgia. So that doesn't explain how I got there the first time. That was very much, a curiosity about the ecosystem. But then I really fell in love with that there and wanted to protect it. And what do you need? Well, I think you really need a good background in biology. And for us also, it's a lot of coding. So that is actually a relatively accessible skill for a lot of people in either school or university. I mean, that really is something you can learn yourself. And then why am I still here? Tenacity. And yeah, I'll hand over.
Nacho, do you want to go next?
Yes, I came to penguins just by chance. I did a master's in another research group on seabird ecology and migration, and Tom was my examiner for my master's thesis. It was a master's by research, so it was like a short type of PhD, very, very short compared to a PhD. And then some years down the line, when I decided to go for a PhD, Tom agreed to be my referee for some PhDs, and at some point he said, actually, why don't you do your PhD with me? And it happened.
Yeah, we didn't have funding until then. I would have poached you during that exam because your code was really good, but we didn't have funding.
Tom was my first coding teacher, and that really helped with my master's. So if there is anybody out there doing their degrees or anywhere, and you want to get into academia, please start coding.
Oh no! Oh,
it is
Twitter, Tom.
can I fix this? So If you think of code, you need to think of coding like casting a spell. Okay. In order to cast a spell, you need to know the whole spell, and then it does it for you. That is what coding is. Coding is casting for spell in the 21st century.
So you're saying that coding is magic?
Coding is magic
No.
when it works.
It works. Yeah, Fiona, you want to tell us a bit about your background and how
you're making coding sound so good. And it is, when it works, it is the best feeling ever. When you find you've spent 3 hours figuring out why something isn't working and it's like a comma in the wrong place, then it's a bit more frustrating. But like, joking aside, it's such a good skill. So I guess kind of by chance too. So I did my undergrad degree in biology. I've always been sort of fascinated with the natural world, and came to Oxford to do my undergrad. And then I actually did my master's in climate change, because it's something that we touch on such a lot and you hear about obviously in the media all the time. But I thought, you know what, I actually want to study climatology properly and really get to grips with the systems. And then really enjoyed research and kind of academic environment, and decided to do a PhD, and thought, you know what, I want to combine those two things, the biology and the climate change. And I knew of the Penguin Watch project because it had already been going when I was doing my first degree. And I knew of Tom, and I thought, this is amazing. There is so much data here, and it's such a cool system. And I'd always really liked penguins, not that I knew I'd be working on them by any means. So in a way, I kind of fell into it. And I initially was put off by the coding, Tom will tell you, but, you know, it turned out to be pretty good. And I had a fantastic time doing my PhD, and learning all of the things that came with it.
Yeah.
But for anyone who already has funding, we do still have a lot of data.
So much data.
So much data. So there's plenty of opportunity. And if you're younger and you're aspiring, then don't forget the coding. Go have a look at that. So I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit, and Jen asked what it's like working in the field in Antarctica.
I think Tom has more field experience. I think you should go.
I mean, it's beautiful. It's a real challenge, but there is no doubt. There's no doubt that you kick yourself several times a day as to how stunningly beautiful it is. What a privilege it is to be there. I mean, it's very different. So what's it like differs completely between somewhere like South Georgia, the Antarctic Peninsula, or inland Antarctica. We don't go inland Antarctica very often because there's no penguins there. So we're always in the kind of maritime on a coast or another, whether or not there's a lot of ice. It is cold. It's highly changeable. So we always have survival kit packed and ready to go. Like you always have a rucksack that is half full of survival kit, because otherwise it will just turn around and try and kill you. But so long as that is always in your mind, I mean, it's breathtakingly beautiful, and half the time it's fine. You know, we're walking around in just a fleece on a sunny day, on a cold day, everything. But it's a genuine, awesome is overused, but it is genuinely awesome. It is life-changing. And I think the first time I went to South Georgia, it was life-changing. It was very obvious my life was not going to be the same after this. This was what I did.
Did you find the same, Fiona?
Oh, absolutely. I think Tom said it all really. It sounds so cheesy when you say things like, oh, it's humbling and a privilege, but it's absolutely the case. And I think for me, it was just so great. I'd gone there to study the penguins, but always been fascinated by the other animals that live there. And so the chance to see whales and albatross and, was just incredible. And the landscapes are just so difficult to describe when you get home. I think I remember Tom saying to me, you can take a picture, but people at home just aren't going to really understand, because those icebergs that you can see on the horizon that are as big as make multi-story buildings, just look tiny. So yeah, it's an incredible place. It is a privilege to go there. Again, South Georgia is just so intense in the wildlife that's there. You do have to respect it. You can't just sort of get carried away with the beauty of it and forget, as Tom says, that you need to be fully prepared for the weather to change and for it to get very cold, and you need to be careful. But yeah, it's amazing, and I feel very, very lucky to have been there.
I guess the different when you know the nearest help is days or an hours away generally.
Yeah.
Mary June again is just, mentioning that she's really interested in getting involved in this area and wants to protect Antarctica. And so I thought this might be a good opportunity, Tom, for you to tell us a bit about the policy impacts that the Penguin Watch project and your research has had.
Yeah, we input into policy in several ways. I mean, we are very much, currently is something we're really trying to do is to get all of these data out in policy-ready summaries. We've input quite a lot into as part of a very big team, we've input a lot into the marine protected area up at South Georgia and also around the South Sandwich Islands. And we're working on disentangling between fishing, climate change, direct disturbance. So something we're working on right now is definitely how big an impact are krill fisheries having on penguin populations. It's something that we have increasing circumstantial evidence. It's not good evidence yet, but we're trying to work out how taking krill close to penguin colonies is impacting on the penguins. So I mean that's one thing as a precaution. You could avoid krill if you want, which is omega-3 supplements. They're also a placebo, as a meta review has shown. So there's no need for you to take them. But yeah, we are equally driven by curiosity, and we want to understand more about how Antarctica and how penguin ecology works, and the very, very practical of how do we make this sustainable? How do we protect these environments? So yeah, we're very lucky in that we get to do both.
Super important work. It's 2 minutes past 5. Are you happy to continue on just for a little bit longer and we can do some quick answers to these? Obviously, everyone, you'll have a chance to ask even more questions over on Oxford Sparks Twitter tomorrow. Like I say, they're doing Twitter takeover there, but I'll just put a couple of these out to you for quick answers. Someone asked, what is the most Penguin Watch monitors lots of sites, but which one most surprised you or has yielded the most important data?
The edges of range have been very interesting.
Do you mean how far penguins can be found, how far they travel? What do you mean?
No, the normal ranges. So if you like, where chin straps tend not to go below the Antarctic Circle, so most of their colonies they start dwindling out, thinning out on the Antarctic Peninsula. When you look at what they do out of their comfort zone versus colonies in the center, their kind of key niche, those comparisons have been very interesting, equally with Adelies and Gentoos. And there's another very unique colony or just unique, I suppose. But that is a paper we haven't quite finished writing yet. So I want to tease that.
Watch this space.
Otherwise, I mean, Fiona, you've probably done the most on this. I mean, can you think of any that are really surprising?
It's a really tricky question, and it could sort of be interpreted in different ways. Certainly when I first visited, again, a site in South Georgia, Salisbury Plain, and you sort of come over the crest of a hill and just see a sea of king penguins with ribbons of brown chicks. I mean, that's a pretty surprising sight to get to. I know that's not particularly what they mean. In terms of, I think that Brown Bluff, so there's a colony which is sort of at the northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula, and that was one that we've been looking at as part of a study that has been looking at chick survival and how that might be being impacted by the krill fishing activity in the region, climate change, tourism. And that was interesting because we were looking through images and we saw that in one particular season there were some massive dumps of snow, these big storms, and we saw through our we call it a mark recapture study, where you see a chick and then you go forward in time and see whether you see that chick again. And that's something that you can do both in the field and, in our case, virtually using images. And we found that these massive dumps of snow were having a real impact, a bad impact on the survival of eggs and chicks. And that was something that we'd known anecdotally and people have seen in the field before, but having these images from that site really allowed us to begin to quantify that and to say, actually, these extreme weather events, which we're predicted to have more of under climate change projections, are actually something that might be a big deal to be thinking about in conservation in the next few years. So that was a site that kind of sprung to mind. But yeah, I think the edge of range effects that Tom's talking about, and really it's kind of watch this space, because we're at this great stage where we have all of this data, we're now able to process it using the data pipelines that we've set up, and all the exciting stuff is just beginning to come out. So yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, no, we definitely will. Stefano's asked, I was wondering why we consider global warming a threat for penguins and not polar bears.
We do.
We do.
I mean, we very much do.
Save the polar bears.
So it's impacting both poles?
Yeah, very much so. And the Arctic far worse. So we're worried about climate change for penguins because it's linked to both habitat and to food. So as sea ice diminishes on the Antarctic Peninsula, we're seeing southward moves of krill, and also less krill available traditionally where penguins, a lot of the high density of penguins have been. The flip side of that is that currently certainly Adelie penguins are doing very well in East Antarctica, where sea ice is stable or even increasing in patches. Mm-hmm. So we're worried, so that's a prey thing. But also it's a complete habitat shift. The difference between solid water and liquid water is 1 degree. And so it can make a complete difference as to whether somewhere is icy, snow-covered. That's very different access to breeding sites. But in the north, in the Arctic, very worried about polar bears because the sea ice there is what polar bears depend on for seals. And so if you lose the seals, you lose the polar bears. So that is not one for us to answer, but it's a massive concern up there, arguably more so. I mean, the difference between the Arctic and the Antarctic is the Antarctic is a continent surrounded by water and ice, and the Arctic is an ocean surrounded by continents. So that is very different with the long-term persistence of ice. I mean, there is a real risk we can lose winter sea ice, let alone summer sea ice in the Arctic.
Great.
Yeah.
Or not great, really. It's but it's really important to be able to, understand more about what's going on there. So it's great you guys doing what you do. So we're just gonna take a last question from YouTube, and I'm so sorry we can't answer them all, but like I say, the team will be over on Oxford Sparks Twitter at Oxford Sparks tomorrow, so you can save all your questions up and have a chat with them over in there tomorrow. But anyway, our last question seems quite fitting from Marina, asking, what was your most exciting achievement working on this project, and how do you envisage the next years? What's next?
Sorry, who's that for?
Nacho.
Nacho's the one who's halfway through his PhD. So Nacho, what do you think?
So what do I think is next? On the thing of from another. So we're now getting everything ready to do a huge analysis of all of the data from all of the years, and once that is organized, we're going to access to phenology studies. We're going to have access to studying what are the drivers of, for example, these phenological changes. What is driving, for example, with the mark recapture studies that Fiona has mentioned before, we could also look at breeding success and chick survival. There is a lot of studies, and it's going to open so many doors that were closed now because of the inaccessibility of Antarctica. Many of these studies might not be incredibly novel, but they will be novel for penguins.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about what that means down the line. So getting some of the answers to these and I'm very excited between the overlap between AI and citizen science and putting those together. And I think when we start to come up with these summary, we've got a data portal that is nearly ready, and trying to turn these from science into visualizations of the problem, something that policymakers can get. I mean, we're very lucky that our data is visual. It's really easy to convey to people what is going on, but we now, with all these summarized data and our analyses, now we need to really present that in a way that we convey it to policymakers continually and hold them to account. So I'm very excited about when we start visualizing these in a way that both the public and policymakers can see the same data.
Yeah, Bernard, have you got any things that you look forward to seeing in the future from the research?
I think that all sounds really exciting. I think, just the fact that we've kind of been working on lots of different elements, and we're just at the stage now where they're all coming together. So we've sort of been developing the citizen science side of things and the AI, and now we're sort of able to pick and choose between those to find this sweet spot, as we often refer to it as, where we're using both of those technologies to the best possible ability. And so I think it's going to be really nice to see all those things come to fruition and start to get those data out and feed them back to people, because the volunteers have been so great at clicking on penguins for us since September 2014. And we're able to now, as Tom said, it's such a visual thing to show them what we've done. And really looking forward to that. And also see the results that come out of these new collaborations that we've got with the different species that we were talking about a few minutes ago. And also, one of my favorite things, other than the actual penguin biology that we're doing, is the fact that we are able to sort of recommend things and give tips to other research groups working on different species all around the world, and say, hey, we're using these methods for penguins, but actually you could do just as good a job with, the seals that you're studying and things like that. So that's something that's great and to watch out for.
And watch this space, because of course we've just launched Seal Watch. So that's a collaboration with Katie Foley over in Hawaii.
About 2 days ago. Hot off press.
And that's very much taking the lessons we've learned from this and trying to help others. And very shortly we will also be launching a polar bear project, which is very much, we have helped build that platform for someone else who actually knows about polar bears.
Amazing. So and I think that answers another question that came up as well. So I think we're going to bring that to a close now. And it's, we could have kept on talking about this forever, but like I say, you can go on over to Oxford Spark's Twitter tomorrow and Saturday, which is Penguin Awareness Day, and you can ask all questions. And we had tons of questions on social media too, which the team will get through. So if you feel like looking at pictures of penguins, and who wouldn't, then Google or use whatever search engine you like to look for Penguin Watch on the Zooniverse platform. You'll be helping real science happen there, as we've just been discussing. So thank you so much, Fiona, Tom and Nacho. It's been absolutely brilliant. Next week, obviously, we have another live Q&A. Fiona, who's it with? I've forgotten.
It's with Tom Crawford, Dr. Tom Crawford.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry,
And
Tom.
he has a brilliant YouTube channel at Tom Rocks Maths. He's done many strange things over the years. He has taken his clothes off while explaining equations and such things. So we'll be talking to him all about how he got into that and the things he's up to nowadays and about his maths that he's doing. And there is a great link because he's also sailed around Antarctica and looked at fluid dynamics in the ocean. So there you go.
Yeah. There you go. So you have that to look forward to as well. So again, thank you so much for watching and all your questions. Head on over to Twitter tomorrow or right now, why not? But we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.